Welcome to End Credits. I'm Corey Tibbetts.
And I'm Miles Rourke.
And this is the podcast that talks to people working behind the scenes in the entertainment industry.
That's right.
And this week we have a VFX/animator guy. It's David M. Breaux, who's worked on a ton of films and video games and worked on The Flash.
The Flash.
Which I know people in the chat room will probably be very interested about, because anytime we do something associated with the CW, the chat room lights up.
Yeah.
How are you tonight, David?
Good.
Well, thanks for coming on and doing this, our fourth live stream?
Fourth live.
Yeah. So we've almost got the bugs worked out. the something about the setup changes every week, so it's been a learning experience.
Yeah. No big bulky headphones.
Yes, the big bulky headphones are gone, and we no longer have our producer sitting at a fold-up table in the corner. So.
Yeah, making faces at us.
Yeah.
So you have a technology advance.
Yeah. Week by week. So we usually start out by talking about your breaking in story. How did you get interested in visual effects and animation?
Oh, wow. Okay. Go way back. Like most animators, I grew up on all the Chuck Jones stuff, all Warner Brothers animation, Disney animation. I actually, when I was in high school, I intended to be a fighter pilot, actually, because I'm a big aircraft nut.
Really?
Cool.
But in looking at what I was good at and what I wasn't good at, which was I am horrible at math, but I'm good creatively, my other interest was animation. So I kind of got on this path towards the end of my high school years, looking to go to art college to do traditional hand-drawn animation. At the same time, I always liked animatronics and creature work in live-action films. So I kind of followed that path, went to the Columbus College of Art and Design in Ohio. And when I got there, actually one of the illustration instructors had a 3D illustration course, which he kind of tweaked more to the visual effects kind of side, doing animatronic type stuff and puppets and things like that. So I got involved in that. And then once I got my junior and senior years in school, I got involved with the computer animation classes, which at that time we were running Symbolics computers, which were the size of refrigerators, and we had 3 machines for 9 students to work on. So the other thing was those machines had to be kept cool. So we were in Ohio in the middle of winter. You come inside and you would sit in a room that had air conditioning full blast to keep those machines cool. But that's where I got involved really heavily in the computer animation side of it. I had been playing on Commodore 64s and Atari STs and stuff like that before. But that's where I really started to get more into, at the time, what was higher end stuff. Once I graduated college, I actually kind of bounced around a little bit, went back home, worked for a sculpting studio in New Orleans, doing some huge sculptures for casinos, to put over their slot machine stuff. We did like an 8-foot high, 36-foot long relief sculpture. One in Mississippi, and I did some stuff that's in the Luxor and MGM Grand. Worked on that stuff with them. And then after that, I actually went back to school up in Minnesota to get sort of certified using SGI machines and Unix machines, because at the time you had to have that to get into visual effects and computer animation.
Wow.
So passed that course with flying colors. Came out of there, actually worked for a little print company that was doing textbooks for college courses for, about 6 months or so. Eventually I got my first gig in games, and that's when we moved to Indianapolis, which was the deer hunting games.
Oh, really?
Okay, yeah.
So I started making redneck hunting games. They were what they They were kind of fun. I actually was responsible for creating, animating, and working with the programmer to put an actual Bigfoot in the game because it had a online component, the version that I was working on, and we wanted to mess with all the players. So I had this thing. It spawned like once every 1,000 times or something. It was some crazy number where it would rarely actually visually spawn, but it would leave tracks in the ground. So we were just doing everything we could to mess with people.
That's awesome.
That was kind of my creature stuff. I wanted to, mess with people, creatures and things. So I did that. Then a friend of mine from there was leaving. I left with him. We went down to Austin. I worked for another game company there where we were doing strategy games. But it was one that had a component where you were up close to characters, and they wanted somebody that could do high-end, creature type stuff, performance type stuff, and they liked the work that I was already doing, so I went and did that. I was kind of the lead animator for a while on that, and then I was there for about a year, and things started getting really weird around the place. So
That tends to happen.
I had to make my exit before things got real bad, and they actually closed the studio the day after I left. So that was good timing.
Although you could probably actually say that they closed the studio because you left.
Uh, Possibly, because there were a lot of people that left before me, so I might have been the last straw. But so I left there. That was in Austin, and actually came to work for a little company out here in Burbank. That was a game company, and I partially took that job because I knew they would move me out here. The game they were doing was for the original Xbox that was coming out. It was supposed to be a launch title for Microsoft, so it had a decent profile to it, higher end graphics at the time. So I decided I was going to get involved with that. That would move me out here to LA, get me closer to everything, and I could kind of evolve from there. I was there for about 2 years before that company imploded, like so many game companies do.
Yeah.
That one imploded, and that kind of pushed a bunch of us out looking for work. I went to Pandemic, which was in Santa Monica at the time, worked for them for a short bit because they were trying to gather up all those people from that game and get it going again. So they pulled a few of the senior people in to try to reform that, and they started negotiating with Microsoft, but that thing ended up not going anywhere for whatever reason. So I ended up leaving there, and that was my introduction kind of into the visual effects world. There, when I left, I went to Digital Domain, and they were interested in me they were doing 2 different cinematics for E3.
Right.
It was the Medal of Honor, Rising Sun, the Pearl Harbor one. They wanted to do this, the big Pearl Harbor action sequence thing. Right. And we're doing a 007 one, which I think was called Everything or Nothing. And they were just intro cinematics that they were going to show at E3 to, show off the games for the first time. It wasn't actual gameplay, it was pre-rendered stuff.
Yes, that always ticked people off back then.
So I got in there and did that. That was kind of my introduction to doing real commercial stuff. I had done a little bit quite a few years back that was hand-drawn when I was in Minneapolis. Right after I'd gone to that school, I got into a little traditional animation studio. But it was kind of like a weird little footnote. I was there for a short time and then gone. But back to the Digital Domain, I left Digital Domain and trying to figure out what I was going to do next. My producer from the game company here in Burbank that folded, she had a history in film doing producing. She actually pulled me in to do post-viz work on the first Garfield film.
Oh, okay.
So because she knew me and she knew I knew Maya, and the visual effects soup at the time didn't know anybody that knew Maya, she was like, "Oh, I know a guy." right? And she pulled me in on that. So that got me kind of introduced to the production side of stuff, and did that at the end of the post-viz stuff, which was we were taking the filmed plates and putting a really blocky, rough Garfield sort of model in there so that eventually the animators would be able to see how people were holding the cat and stuff like that. So it was like previs, but it was previs with final footage.
Interesting.
At the end of that, the VFX or the animation director on the film recommended me to Rhythm and Hues to animate on it. So I moved from the post-viz group over to Rhythm and Hues and was a regular animator on that, which that was my first film to actually animate on.
Oh, wow.
So from there, I finished that. At the end of Garfield, they were getting a lot of work at Rhythm and Hues, so they kept a lot of Garfield people on staff, or they made them staff, keep us around. So a bunch of us stayed. We worked on, I think Electra was the next thing. Then we did Narnia. We did Garfield 2, did Night at the Museum, the first one. And then at that point, they put me on a small project. It was like a special project with the art department. One of the animation directors, Bill Croyer, that I worked for on a lot of stuff, he requested me, and we were taking the Unreal Engine. I think at the time it was either 2 or 3. I don't recall which version it was, but this was the end of 2006. We were doing a short film in the engine before people were really talking about doing that sort of stuff. And it was just the art department. So they pulled a bunch of us over into that. And I was kind of in charge of teaching the other animators how to use 3D Max because I knew it from my game time. And Rhythm and Hues uses all proprietary stuff. So there wasn't any path to go into the Unreal Engine. So we did that. We ended up doing, I think it was about a 5-minute short, 5.5 minute short. We did that in a month. And it was a World War II thing, and it was kind of like this little touching story about this little girl that was kind of caught in the middle of the war and stuff like that. And not the best animation in the world. We were trying to make the tech work and trying to figure it all out at the same time. So it was kind of an experimental thing. At the end of that project, actually, Rhythm and Hues, a lot of the work started going to London. Mm-hmm. A lot of the visual effects work was doing that. So they came up short where they couldn't keep a lot of people on staff. So they let a big chunk of us go at that point. So from there, I actually went to Toronto to work for Spin. I was working on the Outlander film with Jim Caviezel.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Viking movie with the alien creature. Nobody knows what it's called. Everybody knows what it is.
Yeah.
So I did that. I was up there for about 7 months. Came back here. When I came back here, I went right to Digital Domain and immediately started working on Speed Racer. And I was doing previs on that, where they were just inventing shots. They didn't know what they wanted. So we were just kind of prevising stuff to show, different camera moves and what we could, different ideas of how you can move the camera around these cars that are traveling at 350 miles an hour. Just this crazy racetrack thing.
I know that movie didn't do well, but I enjoyed it.
I really liked it.
It's, it's eye candy, literally.
Yeah.
Like you feel like you're gonna have a sugar coma when the movie's over.
Yeah, no, totally. And it was fun because I was a big Speed Racer fan when I was a kid.
Yeah,
right? So I was like, you want me to work on Speed Racer? Sure, I'll work on Speed Racer. Like, how much? I'm like, as long as I get a jump jack shot, I want to make the car jump, right? And I ended up getting this huge, crazy shot where all the cars are trying to ram into him. They're trying to push him off the track. And in the background, you see this animated zebra that's running. I don't know if many people remember it. But what was crazy about that was it was actually textured. each frame was on a section of the track, all the way down the track.
Really?
So while going down the track, my cars and my camera had to be moving at exactly the right speed so that the frame, the outer shape of the frames stayed exactly where they were. So when a frame moved, it progressed back to where the next frame was, so that it always looked like this string of zebras running. Why they did that, I don't know. But I will probably never have to do a shot like that ever again. I can't imagine
Yeah, can't imagine.
why anybody would do that, but they did. So, and I think I had that on my reel, or my longer reel. But I did that, left, left after the end of that, went back to that group from Rhythm and Hues. They now spun off a little group that merged with this company called Blockade. And you guys might recognize the name because they sort of were producers for the Ratchet and Clank movie that just came out.
Okay.
What they were doing on Ratchet and Clank is what we were trying to do back in 2008.
Oh, really?
So we were working with game assets and trying to reuse them to make web stuff. We did some stuff for Lego online, for Lego Batman. We did, I can't even remember the name of a few of the projects. But it was reusing assets and stuff like that. So we had this little tiny company that only had 5 animators, an animation director. We were on the 5th floor of an office building in Sherman Oaks, California here. And our motion capture stage was the little room in the middle of the office. That was the only thing big enough. And we were next to a law firm. So when our guys are jumping around pretending to fight, like the lawyers next door were like, what the hell are they doing? So it was fun. Sometimes we'd go to lunch, you open the door, and all the lawyers are at the end of the hall like, what the hell's... So again, that thing eventually shut down. I went back to Rhythm and Hues, worked on Land of the Lost, doing the Grumpy, the big T-Rex. I did a lot of stuff on him. After that, I went on to the Chipmunks film, which was the second Chipmunks film at that time.
The Squeakquel.
Yes. Did that. At the end of that, I left, went back. I'm trying to keep the dates kind of together in my head. That was around the end of 2009. Yeah, at that point, I went back to Digital Domain and was working, or I think I'm missing something there, but and that's what I say. It's this winding path.
So essentially, you're never ending one job to the next job to the next job kind of situation.
Yeah. Well, basically the next thing I did, I ended up going back to Digital Domain. I forgot what happened between the two, but I ended up going back to Digital Domain in 2010. They brought me in on Tron Legacy, which I was dying to work on.
Yeah.
And the people that were running it, I knew. And I kept bugging and harassing them, like, you guys hiring? You guys hiring? And finally the animation suit had the girl call me, and she's like, yeah, we wanted to know if you'd be interested in working on Tron. I'm like, yes. When? Bill, I'm really good friends with Bill Croyer. He animated the original light cycle sequence in the original Tron.
Wow.
Right. So I'm like, this is the circle. This is the perfect circle. So I just wanted to get in on it so that I could work on it because I'm a big Tron nut. I've got an arcade machine downstairs, one of the original Tron arcade things.
Nice.
And so I was there for Tron. Then I moved on to Real Steel, and then on to Thor.
Wow.
And after that, I jumped to Blur for a short bit, doing some more game cinematic stuff for Resident Evil. Then from Blur, I went to Pixamundo. And at Pixamundo, I was on the Terra Nova TV series, doing dinosaurs again. Stuck around for Hunger Games, we did the Tracker Jackers, the Hornets.
Yeah.
Which was fun because we used there was no flocking software for us. So we would literally place, 80 to 100 of these uh, wasps and stuff around a shot and just do it manually. So, when people say, oh, the computers do all the work, I'm like, yeah, okay, the computers do all the work. So I did that, ended up back at Pixamundo in Santa Monica working on Die Hard 5, doing some helicopter stuff, which I was all jazzed about because there was this big giant Russian helicopter, and I'm an aircraft nut, so I was riding the rigger hard time. I'm like, this has to be the best helicopter ever because no one ever does helicopters correctly. The rotors on them, it drives me insane. So moved around from there back to Blur for a little bit for the big Halo redo. We did that, and that was like basically 6 months, 6 to 8 months for like 20 animators to do basically an hour of footage. So we did that, and then from there, I taught for about a year at Noman, teaching animation and working on their curriculum stuff. When I left that, I actually got involved with John Favreau's group. MPC brought me in to do what they were calling advanced previs.
Okay.
And so I did that for about 3 months with MPC. Their part was done. They moved us on to digital domain side of it, which was all previs. But it was kind of cool because me and one other animator, we did the entire sequence with Ka, the snake. And we were both working with the actual rig that they were going to use. And part of my job was to kind of work with the riggers and say, it needs to do this, it needs to do that, this isn't working, that's not working.
Okay, so your job was actually to make the rig act like a snake.
Well, they started out, they told me the snake that we were using was the one from Harry Potter. And I was like, okay. But I had to do, in the shot I did, and in the final film, the reason it was called advanced previs is I was basically doing all the animation blocking. They were going to send my animation over to London and have the animators there and the sim guys do their little tweaks on top of it. And that was it. They were supposed to stick with what I had and use it. So it was kind of like pre-animation. And the crazy thing with that rig was it not only had to be coiled around Mowgli, but it had to be able to move around him without moving him. It had to move through the tree. So it's, the body, you're having to keep part of the body still while another part is moving. And like, that's the kind of stuff that rigs don't want to do.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of back and forth in London about that. So I did that. I left early last year, in January of last year. Left there, I went back to Austin. Was working for BioWare on the Star Wars Night of the Old Republics, or Night of the Old Republic. We did the Knights of the Fallen Empire expansion.
Nice.
Storyline. And then that brings me back to November of last year when I came back. After that was done, I came back and dropped right onto the Flash. Well, it was the whole group at Encore. There's, I don't know, 120, 130 people. But basically that group does the Flash, Legends of Tomorrow, and Supergirl all at the same time.
Yeah.
So, I landed in there and I was supposed to be on Legends of Tomorrow. I was doing that, and then occasionally you would get a shot from another show, just so they could keep everybody busy and keep the shows going, because you're right up against a wall when it comes to trying to do this stuff. Because you get to work, you're trying to produce it, and 2-3 weeks later, roughly,
Yeah, it's be on TV.
and and that's do a film, right? And you go away for a few months or whatever, and then you see it, and you're, hey, we're done.
Yeah.
The Flash, I would come, or on those shows, the DC shows, I would come home, sit down and watch something I did just a handful of weeks ago. And, and the whole time, my girlfriend's watching it, and, she's like getting into it because she doesn't know what's going on story-wise. And I'm like, sitting there going, oh, yeah, I could drop spoilers. All these other stuff, and I'm trying to enjoy it too because it's this ongoing thing. It's not like a movie that you watch for 2 hours or 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Like every week we were watching all of the shows as I was working on them. So it got to be almost this kind of living the shows because I was doing it during the day and then we'd watch them, 3 nights a week, 4 nights a week. We were watching them because we watched Arrow, even though we're not doing Arrow. We would watch that since it's in the continuity of the shows.
Yeah, exactly.
But I guess it's kind of cool because you're still getting that fan experience that we get. It's like, it's like every time a new episode is on, it's like, wow, and then we have to talk about it afterwards. But I don't know if you guys do that, but.
Well, we have the episodes to watch without the visual effects. We get the rough cuts. But a lot of times I wouldn't watch them. I would just work on whatever they gave me. And it would kind of keep me in the dark about some stuff. So I was like, this is all I need to know about. This is all I want to know about. Yeah. So I still have some fun. And that you kind of do that. So some episodes you know a little more, some you know a little less. Some you know absolutely nothing because you happen to be on, Supergirl when Flash did an episode that didn't need a whole lot of work. All of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, like episode I know nothing about. So, that was kind of cool. And I mean, just recently, just last week, I got called in for basically to help out with another little effects studio. They had called me in to work on Zoo because of all the animal stuff I did on Night at the Museum, but ended up not putting me on that, for the production timeline shifted or something on them. So they didn't have time to bring me up to speed to work on that. So they ended up putting me on Salem. And they were like, here, we need you to animate some background people, which I can't say doing what, but they were background people. So, all right, so I spent a week and a half kind of doing that for them. And then that job's done, right? So that ended on Friday. So now I'm, sitting, waiting around for Flash and all that stuff to start up again. So you never know when things are going to pop up and where you're going to jump, and
Yeah, that is the problem with that type of industry is you never know where you're going to work.
Yeah, I had an offer from NBC to go work on final animation for Jungle Book, but they wanted me to go to London. And I have a house here. I have my girlfriend here, right? I can't go afford to rent an apartment in London. I looked at the prices. I literally cannot afford it. So I didn't do that. I had a couple opportunities to go to Singapore for ILM to work on Transformers 4. Transformers 4, and then I forgot what the other movie was. It was that fairy tale thing that they did a year or two ago. And both of those, I ended up turning them down just because time and, expenses and complications working in another country. It just wasn't going to work out for us. So I was like, as much as I'd like to, I kind of have to pass on it.
Yeah.
And that kind of sucked because I was like, oh, I've been wanting to work for ILM. Here's my, I've gotten 2 opportunities and I couldn't do it because it was out of the country. I got one other previous opportunity on Cowboys and Aliens, and it was because I was still at Rhythm and Hughes, and I was like, well, I'm staff here. I don't really want to just walk out on them for this one thing, and then I'm going to be a freelancer again. Well, it turned out I ended up being a freelancer again. Anyway, so, you never know where it's going to go.
Yeah, Cowboys and Aliens. That's another one of those movies I just love.
Sometimes you just got to love the popcorn.
Yeah.
Sometimes the story doesn't matter.
It makes you laugh, makes you, go, ooh, Sometimes that's all you need at that moment.
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes a movie just needs to be fun,
Yeah.
but sometimes you want a bit more story than, say, the Transformers movies have.
Plus, I'm a big fan of Godzilla, right? And I always use that as a comparison because, like, the recent Godzilla film, like, for the look and the character, like, I thought it was great. People were saying, "There's too much story. We want to see more Godzilla," right? And then half the time, people are, "There's not enough story. Like, it's all effects." It's like most Michael Bay films.
Yeah.
It's like pick your side because like they go all around. But you go back to the '60s, the '70s Godzillas, right?
Yeah.
Most of them were pretty dumb,
Yeah.
but they're pretty darn entertaining.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They're just fun to watch.
I personally really enjoyed the new Godzilla film.
Yeah, I did
It
too.
could have used a little more Godzilla, sure.
Yeah.
But it was the introduction. It was like a reintroduction to the story.
And for me, the first time they showed him, when he was there at the airport, when they had that reveal, that's like me as a Godzilla fan, like I'm wanting to stand up in the chair and be like, yeah, like take him
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
You're just waiting for the crap to start rolling.
Oh, and God, they milked it. Like, I mean, they just kept you on the edge of your seat. It's like, come on, show them. Come on, show them.
Yeah, and that was the part that I liked. And it's like I can forgive some of the other part because you gave me that. Like, you gave me those moments with him.
Absolutely. I'm a little biased, though. 'Cause it was like one of the few films I'm proud of that I got my name in.
Yes. Yes.
It only happened like 2 or 3 years after I left the industry. I just happened to go in and help out for 2 weeks. Managed to get my name on 3 films.
It happens all the time. There's lots of people in the industry I know. I've had it a couple times on films where you don't get credit. You either don't get credit while a chunk of the same team gets credit because the studios, not the visual effects studios, but the film studios, will say, we're only allowing this many credits.
Yeah.
So you have to pick who you want to be in there, right? So and that always upsets everybody. I've been on shows where essentially the company gets the credit, and that's it. Maybe they're top tier,
Can't hear you,
few
Michelle.
suits, and that's it. And nobody from the team gets any credit. It's all whatever their kind of negotiations are. So that stuff kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the first films our team ever worked on were like the Matrix sequels.
Mm-hmm.
And originally we're told that we would be in the credits, and that our boss called up to say, like, the movie's going to be released soon. He calls up, say, don't you need our names or, whatever? And they're like, oh, you're not in the credits. It's like, you said we were in the credits. They were like, well, you're not getting into the credits. Like, so he started to throw a stink, and they said, do you want to work with us ever again? And it was,
That's how that.
so shut up.
That's how that usually happens with visual effects companies.
Yeah.
If they try to do much of anything, the studios kind of.
Oh yeah. Well, I think the company I used to work for worked on over 80 feature films, and I think there's 4 that actually acknowledge us or even have anybody's name in it.
Well, one of the things that bugs me the most with credits, I mean, I guess it's not that big a deal, but on TV, you see them just rocket through credits.
Oh, yeah.
A pause on the producer's name, on the director's name. It's like, none of these people matter except for these guys. that gets under my skin.
And the other thing, it's like the networks themselves are now squishing everything into boxes so they can show previews to something else.
Right. Yeah, I've always said that even the unions for we don't have a union for visual effects, but the other unions, I would have thought would have long fought that battle and insisted that their credits be seen for their people. But apparently, either they lost that battle or they just don't care about it, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's very upsetting when you work on a movie for 2-3 months and you don't get any credit, but the guy who served mac and cheese did.
Especially when you work on it for all of the 2 or 3 months, including like your nights, your weekends.
I know. Many an 18-hour day, drive home, spend 5 minutes with your wife, shove food in your mouth, go back to work. Sometimes you might get to sleep. It's
Yeah, and then on the TV shows, on the Flash and all that, they've tried to. I mean, it's almost a necessity because it's television. Because you're just, it's like a train that's just rolling, and you got to keep up with it. Because they've got air dates, right? They can't just like, oh, we'll push the date.
yeah.
You know, they can't do that. So they seem pretty good about they would try to only do it when it was absolutely necessary. And sometimes you could debate whether do we really need to be here this late? But then there were days where you were doing an 8-hour day, and you're like, are we on a TV show still? Because this doesn't feel like it.
Yeah.
So but you get that constant rise and fall of the amount of work that you have to do. So one day you could have so much work you don't know how you're going to get it done, and the next day you're kind of sitting there going, "Is there anything to do?" And they're like, "No, just wait, because there's probably a note that'll come back."
Yeah, that's the most uncomfortable feeling when you're working in animation or visual effects or anything that's art related, because the artists always get let go first.
Well, the first time I worked for Digital Domain, when I was on those EA projects, that was for about 3 months. We did both of those projects in 3 months, and the last week was just insane. Everybody's just rolling as fast as they could. People kicking back changes. You do the change real quick, you kick it back to them, and it was kind of like hot potato. And I remember we had all the animators were in one room. We had 4 Davids in the room. And there were 9 people in the room. There were 4 of us were named David. There were 2 telephones, and people would call and they're like, "Can I speak to David?" Like, which one? Because it was a lighter downstairs that needed something, or whatever, and just trying to keep things going. And the last day I was on it, like, I finished my last thing, and I said, I'm like, "What's next?" And it was like one of these things where you're so used to moving fast that you can't possibly imagine that you're done. You're like, no, there's something, I'm missing something. Where is it? And you're gunning for that, like, give me something to do. I need something. And they're like, no, just sit steady, and all right. And that day, I actually got let go and reinstated 4 times before I ever left the room. So they're like, no, you're done. You can come, turn in your badge. You can pick up your last check and, check out and go home. Like, okay, get ready. Literally getting my stuff together to walk out. Phone rings. Don't go anywhere. Like, what? We might have some notes coming back. All right. Sit back down and you sit there and you wait. It's the weirdest thing. And I wasn't the only one. There were several of us that went through that. And it was just that sudden halt of the production. Like, this must be done. And it's like, well, no, it can't be. And you're trying to feel out until eventually everybody settles down and goes, okay, no, we're done.
That's really hard on your body.
It's hard on your mind.
Yeah. Well, you'll literally make yourself sick from work, and then sudden stop, and you don't know what to do.
What's hardest on your body is sitting at the desk all day and drinking, soda to keep your energy up or whatever. I gained weight, right? And it's weird. Every studio I've worked at, I have a different diet. Diet isn't I'm dieting, but like my eating habits changed based on where I'm at and what's available.
Yes.
Like, so you could go to some studios and they're like really constrained. You're like, well, there's not much I can do. Okay. So, and you tend to not gain a bunch of weight. And then there's other studios that are high stress and you're just like, I need a soda. I need, any happy food, whatever. So that changes everywhere you go.
Oh yeah, when I first started at the 3D scanning house I was working at, it was the first time that there was free pop in the fridge all the time, and it was,
Yeah,
I put on about 20 pounds in the first few months.
yeah. Rhythm and Hues had that. Blur had that, and it's very generous of them, but it's very dangerous for me.
At least when I was working in video games, they had juice and water available.
Yeah.
Things. I tried to stay away from the coffee, from the pop as much as possible. Can't stay away from coffee.
No.
Yeah,
Can't survive without coffee.
I'm not a coffee person. I go straight for the sodas. So that's my Achilles heel.
Can't. If I don't have a coffee by 10 a.m., it's caffeine headache explosion time.
And for me, I guess I'm like David here. It was like, it's like I have my coffee in the morning, and then I don't touch coffee for the rest of the day.
Can't do it.
Yeah, it's straight to the pop.
Although I'm also the type of person who can have a coffee right before bed.
Yeah.
There's so much caffeine in my system, it just doesn't affect my sleep.
You just burn it out naturally.
That's right.
So, do you have any advice for people aspiring to be in your industry?
Well, no. For visual effects, which is primarily what I'm doing right now, the biggest thing is to stay mobile right now. Right? Like, if you have a house, if you have some serious roots somewhere, it's gonna be hard. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me right now, and I'm lucky to be associated with the DC shows right now because those are fairly long running projects, mm-hmm. and as long as they get picked up the next season, you tend to have something to go on. And this was my first season on them. Some of the other artists were already on the first season and the second. But yeah, I would say for anybody looking to get into it, if you're a student, like, know that there's places out there that will try to misclassify you. They'll try to lowball you. They will do anything and everything to get you to do their show as cheap as possible. There are other places out there that are reasonable with what they do, right? The golden days of people throwing money at you, like, I don't even think I was on the heel end of that. When I started, there was a little bit up trajectory left in the thing, and then everything kind of started going down. So it's very hard to keep your rates up right now. They're kind of staying static, or you have to fight a little harder to keep it up. So coming into the industry, you don't have a lot of experience behind you or anything like that. So you do have to be willing to do the odd job, to do, smaller projects or whatever up front. But you're not, you don't want to be in a position where, you're just saying yes to whatever they throw at you. You still want to try to keep a reasonable expectation on cost, for your talents, what you're capable of doing. Because, if we all start just taking whatever we can get, and sometimes people have to do that, like there is no option, you have to pay your bills, you have to eat. But if everybody started just lowballing to get the project, right, it drives us all down, and what it does is it sets expectations that are increasingly lower and lower, for everybody. So those same people that are trying to get in, if they're lowballing it just to get a job, they're also lowering the ceiling on themselves. They just haven't hit the ceiling yet, but it will happen. right? And the people that are higher up, and I mean, there's people higher than me, right? I don't consider myself at the top of the food chain by any stretch. They're feeling the ceiling coming down, right? I'm feeling the ceiling coming down, and we're fighting to kind of hold it up.
Yeah.
And that's for the benefit of everybody, but everybody has to start at the bottom and work their way up. The biggest advantage, I guess, we would have, if you call it an advantage, is that there's so much of this stuff that needs to be done, right? There's more and more shows with effects. There's more and more movies with effects. They want to do bigger stuff. They're not necessarily doing better stories, so writers have got to have it pretty good right now too, because they're in very short supply for quality. So, but for us, there's so much of the stuff that needs to be done, and then you've got this kind of crossover with games, where what I do as an animator, I can take that over into games, although there's some difficulty in that because games kind of say, well, you're not a gamer, you're a film guy. Just like film says, you're not a film person, you're a game person, right? Mm-hmm. They try to put up these walls, and it's like, an animator is an animator. A good animator is a good animator. There's some things you need to understand about game animation that's slightly different than film, and vice versa. Same thing for modeling. A modeler that models for film, yeah, they've got all the polys they want in the world. They can work in games. They can model just as well. They just need to understand the limitations of the game stuff. Mm-hmm. And, so like, it's not impossible. It's just you have to demonstrate the knowledge of what they need in order for them to go, oh, okay, I guess you could come on over. For a while, I had a hard time getting back to game stuff, and it was a friend of mine that was the art director in Austin at BioWare, and he was like, yeah, we'll bring you in, right? And a lot of game places want you to do tests to prove that you know what you're doing. And it's like, I've got 16 years of this, games, film, and commercials. Like, really? I got to do a test? But these places feel that they're uneasy with it. They're like, well, there's a lot of people that kind of, pull their way in, and then they get in here, and then they really can't do what we wanted them to do. Yeah. So I can understand it from that standpoint, but I also think it's gotten a little out of control on that side, where generally in visual effects places, they don't ask you to take a test. They just show me your work. Here's what I've done. And they go, okay, looks like you can do it. And then they'll bring you in. So, if you just concentrate on making the best work possible, that's going to be your best chance to get in. The other thing in visual effects to know is that there's creature work, there's digital double work, there's previs work, right? Those just in visual effects, that animation or those kind of compartments for animation are different things, right? Previs, they want somebody that's more of a filmmaker's type of person. Yeah. You can do camera work, you understand composition, you understand how to move a character through the frame without, jarring the viewer's eye, or how to set up a sequence of shots and things like that. So there's one set of skills there, and it's usually camera that they're most worried about or most interested in. Doing digital doubles, right? You've got all your animation stuff we've all learned from The Illusion of Life and all the different animation books out there. But when you're doing digital doubles, you have to understand that you're trying to match realistic physics, and you're trying to make it look like they put a stunt guy in there and they damn near killed the guy. Like, the purpose if you get too floppy and too crazy, then it starts to fall apart. It starts to lose the perception that maybe this was a stunt guy that did it. And that's a hard one to straddle that line, because I do it myself. Like, you get busy doing stuff, and your animation brain kicks in, and you're just and you're cleaning up your curves and everything, and all of a sudden you feel, oh crap, and everything's like all swingy and floaty and floaty and everything, and they're like, no, it's just not because Disney animation is not what real life looks like. So you have to understand that for digital. And then when you're doing animation for shots, not only are you usually having to match creatures and weird things that don't really exist, you're trying to make those things match in a frame next to a person. And it has to look like it's subject to the same gravitational forces, the wind, whatever happens to be going on. So again, you're taking this thing that's a complete, fantasy, and you're trying to wrestle it over to convince people that it's real. And so it's weird because you're like, well, I can't mocap this. I have to. So you're trying to invent a realistic expression of how this thing moves. And then motion capture being another place where you tend to be given mocap and you have to clean it up, or inevitably, and this is the thing that always gets me with mocap in films, is it's always sold as this will be quick. We'll be able to mocap it, throw it in, boom, and out the door.
Yeah.
And it's like, it never happens.
You got to clean up those jitters.
It's because as soon as the mocap lands and you stick it on whatever robot, we did tons of that on Real Steel. We did that on Halo. As soon as you put it on the character, inevitably the director looks at the mocap that he directed. Can we do this with it? Can we do that with? Like, they start wanting to modify it. So you're, working with that mocap is sort of like driving the car next to you with like a broomstick through the window. you're working with what it's doing, but trying to guide it to make it do what you want it to do without losing the realism. And I fought with that myself on Real Steel, because that was the first really intense mocap stuff I had done. The way it was captured, I don't recall what the system was, but I would go in and I would see some little jiggle in the hip or somewhere, and I would want to blow away a bunch of keys and just kind of smooth it out. Well, what happens is all of the parts of the character are essentially jiggling around to move with that thing. And if they're under the hierarchy of whatever you just blew away those curves for, like that thing starts moving smooth, but now everything above it starts this kind of jig. And I fought with that so hard on that show, like trying to get my head wrapped around it, and eventually did. And I've gone on to do a lot of mocap stuff now, and that's just kind of the weird thing that you're not thinking about, because you think, oh, this is motion capture. It's it is what it is, and it does, to me, it does take away some of the creativity for the animator. Just that you're not the one providing the performance, you're providing the polish on the performance.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
In most cases, not all cases, because I have had some where they came in and they're like, just dump the mocap, and just key it, because it's it's too big of a change that they want or whatever. And I've had times where I'll take mocap and essentially use it as reference. I go through and, because mocap, you've got a key on everything. So I go through and I grab my key poses, just like you would do if you were blocking out animation. I grab all my key poses, I go back, grab some minor poses so I know that the body's moving and the timing is there, and then I just start blowing everything away between it. And I essentially end up with an animated shot that's based on the mocap, but contains none of the mocap. It just contains the pose.
Nice.
So, and that's the kind of techniques that you start to develop in your head when you're like, you run into these weird situations. You're like, how the hell am I going to solve this? So you're, as an animator, like every shot you get is something you pretty much haven't done before. So you're always trying to figure out, how do I, grab some bubble gum and a plastic spoon and make this damn thing work? It's what I want it to do.
Oh, it's true. Well, we're actually almost pretty much an hour, so we actually have to wrap up.
Okay.
unfortunately, because the conversation was actually getting really good here.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you so much for coming on. Anything that you want to promote, your online presence? Or?
if people want to see what I'm doing, they can go to my website, which is www.siliconriot.com.
Nice name.
If you do a search for my name, usually I'm up at the top. And I've also got a kind of an indie game and virtual reality kind of startup thing I'm trying to get moving on. And that's you can. There's not much to see, but you can see it at siliconriotent.com.
All right.
Which stands for Silicon Riot Entertainment. So hopefully one day I'll be making my own content. That's the goal.
That's every animator's dream, I think. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
All right. If anybody had questions that we didn't get to answer or whatever, they can feel free to email me. My website or whatever. So.
Fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
fortunately, our screen kind of.
Yeah, we got a screensaver going on here, so.
I don't know what happened there, but if we fix that, we'll get you back on again sometime. We covered your breaking in, and we'll get some technical questions going.
All right. Cool.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we will be doing another live stream immediately after this with a composer.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Oh, nice.
Composers are notoriously late, so hopefully stay tuned for Nima Fakara. So until then,
Roll end credits.